I'd like to welcome you to today's Ask Me Anything session. It is wonderful to see so many students, alumni, and friends joining us today. My name is Harriet Chaquin, and I am the Program Director of Work Integrated Learning Co-op programs, all based at the Surrey SFU campus, and will be serving as a co-host for this session. Also joining me as co-host is Kia Mersale, past president of the Computing Science Student Society. We're excited to offer this session today online. If you've attended any of our other online sessions lately, you'll know that over the past few months, we've been working very hard to transfer programming from in-person to online. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land I am speaking to you today on in Maple Ridge, BC, is where I have the privilege to live, work, and play on the unceded traditional territories of the Kwantlen First Nation, Katzie First Nation, and Coast Salish people. Just before I introduce our panel, I want to highlight a few points that will make today's session run really smoothly. For those of you who are new to Zoom webinar, you will notice that, unlike Zoom meeting or other meeting platforms, your microphone and video capability are automatically turned off. But you can still communicate with us in a few other ways. If you're having technical difficulties or need assistance, please use the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask questions during the event, which we encourage and welcome, you can use the Q&A box located also at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, a reminder that this session is being recorded for public viewing after the event. I will now hand you over to Kia to introduce today's speakers.
Thank you, Harriet, and welcome everyone. We are delighted to welcome our SFU alumni panelists, Ian Reddy, Director of Information Technology at PayPal, Griselda Joe, Senior Manager, Business Operations, Finance and Global Customer Operations at PayPal, and last but not least, Fred Bantados, Financial Planning and Analysis at PayPal. Our three panelists are from the San Francisco Bay Area, are longtime friends of SFU, and have come here today to talk about their professions, discuss the rapidly changing tech industry, and provide insight into their career journeys, as well as answer any questions you may have. We're going to dive straight into some questions that we have for our panelists. As mentioned previously, please feel free to use the Q&A function to add your questions in at any time. Now, Fred, perhaps you can start with this one. Can you please talk about your career path while in school and after graduation? What led you to where you are today? I believe you might be muted, Fred.
There you go. Yeah, thanks, Kia. So I graduated in 2011 with a joint major in molecular biology and business administration. So I had the unique opportunity of taking a joint major course at SFU that combined both science and business. And that gave me a really competitive edge going into the tech industry right outside of when we were coming out of the recession. This kind of unique skill set allowed me to be the bridge between technical engineers, scientists, as well as business analysts and finance personnel in order to tell the story of the business and how we all grow together and build towards something that we can sell to our customers as well as generate income for our shareholders. This experience in tech over the last 5 years in Vancouver allowed me to gain opportunities to work down in the Bay Area when our company was bought out by a large fintech player in the States.
Okay, great. Ian, would you be able to answer the same question?
Yeah, sure. And I really like this question because the career really does start while you're in school. And having the good fortune of going to SFU, which is not only a very diverse, comprehensive curriculum and community in that, but it gave me the flexibility to do things like I worked at Triumph for a semester. I worked in a physics lab. I worked in a computing science lab. And I also occasionally was working part-time while I was taking my studies, also part-time, that sort of thing. So kind of a big thought there is the choices and the decisions and the discipline you learn while in school are what set the basis for your career success down the line. But after 11 years at SFU, I graduated from SFU. I worked for 11 years at SFU. I was in love with the community and the flexibility that I got and the ability to come up with ideas and try things out. and I had a great time there. Eventually, I turned to Silicon Valley and went to Cisco Systems. The experience of learning to do a lot with a little. I'm not saying the university didn't have much, but we did leases on equipment. I had to really figure out for 3 years what we were going to do with the investments we were making in technology. And in between that, had to really focus on optimizing and operating things really effectively and efficiently with the decisions I'd made. Was a great basis for Cisco Systems, which is a massively growing company at the time, but then eventually went through its own swings and upturns and downturns through the dot-com bust. I'm dating myself, right? The 2008 Great Recession, things like that. All those skills came into play later. And then eventually going to eBay and helping them separate eBay and PayPal apart and taking the PayPal path. Again, that ability to understand how things operate and to be able to experiment early in my career really gave me a lot of insight later that and reused skills that I didn't realize I had. So I had a great time. I would say the key thing is being flexible early in your career and trying stuff gives you the chance to apply those skills later in situations you might not have anticipated.
Thank you for that, Ian. Griselda?
Thanks for the question. So at SFU, I was a major in business and psychology. Within business, I specialized in marketing and human resources. And so when I was at SFU, I was very heavily involved in the extracurricular and the student clubs, and that allowed me to get involved with a group called Isaac. I believe they still exist. But through Isaac, I was able to land an international internship with a company in London during the financial crisis, which was a very fun experience. But through that, I was able to work internationally, which was a passion of mine. And then I worked for 2 tech mobile startups. I had a very big interest in mobile startups at the time in London, and that brought me to San Francisco, where I joined PayPal 7 years ago. So my advice for current students is be involved. It really does make a difference. It's, to Ian's point, it's a great time to experiment, to learn, to know what your passion is, and as well learn to be flexible and accept opportunities outside of the box that you may have of your future vision, because a lot of times opportunities come up, and just by being open to them, you don't know where your future may go. So that's how I ended up where I am today.
Great. Thank you, Griselda. We're going to continue with you for the next question. Many of us are finding ourselves working or studying at home. What is the one tip you'd have for someone starting a new role remotely?
It's a great question. We're in 10th month of quarantine now, work from home. I think in the Bay Area, we were all very excited about the ability to work from home. And for those who visited the Bay Area, the commute is terrible. So anything that you could do to save time from commuting is a nice gift. But very quickly, you realize that your free time that you gain back from your commute could be overtaken with work, because it's really easy just to wake up, open your laptop, and then stay on your laptop for the full day. I could see Fred nodding. So my advice, whether you're working remotely with a new company or even just studying and isolated at home, is to have a really great schedule that balances both your work, your wellness, and your play. And so I know it sounds cliche, but it really makes a difference. For me personally, I block out time on my calendar to make sure nobody else at work books the time that I want to dedicate to meals or to my family. You need to treat your family with the same and personal time with the same discipline as your work discipline, because it can really very easily be eaten up by work and colleagues. And then those in the Bay Area who have experience working in the Bay Area, you'll know that whenever you have open spot in your calendar, people think that's when you're free. And so it's your schedule gets booked up very quickly. So my advice is make sure you have a good balanced schedule for fun and work.
Thank you for that, Griselda. Now, Ian, we're going to go to you for this next one. What trends, innovations, or shifts have you noticed within your profession, especially within a COVID workplace environment?
Yeah, so my profession's arguably is IT. It's important to remember that PayPal's made up of many, many different disciplines, and you see 3 distinct ones here on this call. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. First of all, the IT industry generally over the last couple of decades has gone through these major swings and adoption of things like software as a service, and then we saw more and more of infrastructure as a service, and now platform as a service. So all the layers of the conceptual stack, solution stack, being not just in the cloud, but being available, and you can procure them basically within minutes and ramp them up and scale them down if you need. The latest thing is actually integration as a service. I was saying one of the last great bastions of IT endeavor was to go and connect all these pieces together. But now with solutions like Workato and Boomi and others out there, there's actually now cloud-based integration services that connect all these other services together. So the implication on IT is you still need to be very fluent in the technologies, and you're more often find yourself in a bit of an analysis and consultancy type role, trying to pick the best solutions and not necessarily building them. What's happened more recently with COVID, so initially March, April, a huge focus on how was the workforce enabled, were they productive, what was the workplace analytics telling us, not for any malicious, or big brother reason, but really, have we really got people set up correctly to be able to work successfully from home? What we quickly found out was that actually work-life balance is suffering. People are actually working a lot. They're taking their commute and they're just going straight from breakfast, if they have breakfast, straight to their computer. They're starting work. They're losing a sense of time. They don't have those walk-up interruptions that give them a sense of time passing. So we've turned more recently to like work-life balance type things, tools that will help people with the stress of being in a fixed environment, juggling family, that sort of stuff. So more and more around, okay, the workforce is definitely, if anything, overproductive. We need to create some balance and also experience. What's their experience? So we've lost that direct line of sight. In my function, current function, it actually does the IT support for the enterprise. And we're not getting that sensing mechanism around it. Is the technology working for people? So we're working a lot on some new technologies that will help us see whether everything's working efficiently. Can we remove the stress of the technology from the discussion while we're trying to provide better work-life balance?
Great comments, Ian. Thank you so much. So I'm going to pose this question to Fred and then Griselda. What top skills are high in demand in your professions right now?
Yeah, so in our profession, we always value those that have a very strong critical thinking muscle. And this is one of the pieces, especially when it comes to finance and working in a technology company. You're dealing with many very vague subjects. You don't have always complete data. You're trying to make sense of someone else's world where you're not usually accustomed to it. So being able to dive in, have a conversation, simplify some of the ideas and present it in some meaningful format and manner is something that we value very much here at PayPal. This kind of skill is something that you start developing as an undergraduate or even a graduate at SFU by taking multidisciplinary coursework. You're exposed to many different sets of ideas, and then you're able to layer on your deep experience in your major in order to try to make sense of someone else's world, and then try to understand what is the real problem and what is the actual solution that's going to fix the root problem that's being presented for you. A lot of other places that you can get this kind of critical thinking experience is being very involved. So as Griselda mentioned, she was very involved in Isaac. I myself was very involved with the Student Marketing Association, with the Business Administration Student Society, and also doing many different types of case competitions on the business side. and every single time that you're involved and you're practicing, you're talking to other people, you're trying to understand what the real problem is, and then you're working as a team, understanding each individual's role on that team in order to try to solve this one problem that's being presented to you at the time. And that is really every day at PayPal. Every day is a little bit different. Every problem has its own nuance. The solution may be obvious, many times it's not. And as a team, you have a deadline to make the best decision possible and go with it. And if you're finding issues along the way, you have to be kind of there to be able to think through what are the correct courses or what are the corrective measures that you need to do in order to get the job at the end of the day.
Thanks so much. Over to you, Griselda.
Thank you. So I know on this call there's computer science students and potentially future CTOs and other senior leaders. And just based on my experience and what I've observed in this heavily data-heavy driven environment, one, it's really good to be able to understand data. That's almost like hygiene now, like regardless of whichever function you work in, communications, operations, whatever it may be, you need to understand data. But to take it to the next level, you also need to know how to tell the story behind the data as well. So that's one of the number one things leaders look for, especially coming from a computer engineer or computer scientist or data scientist. It's not enough now just to know how to crunch numbers. You have to be able to do the storytelling, be able to influence, be able to do strategic planning, be able to know how that data and the customer story ties together. How does this data relate to the customer at the end of the day, and how can that help the business?
Okay, great. Thank you very much. For this next one, we're going to go back to you, Ian. What do you think are some common misconceptions that people have about your profession, or simply stated, what don't we know?
Yeah, it's a great question. Anecdotally, by the way, sometimes at like job forums and fairs, I'd be asked, do you hire developers? And the answer would be like, some. Do you hire DBAs? Some. Do you hire sysadmins? Yeah, of course. Some, right? But I remember a chemical engineer, a student, and chemical engineering student asked me, would you ever hire somebody from chemical engineering if you're willing to try IT? See, here's the misconception about IT is it needs a wide blend of skills because it has to relate to the business, right? In so many ways. And it gets thought of as a technical function, but actually it's the bridge between technology and the business getting stuff done. And I've hired people with psychology degrees, philosophy degrees, English majors, communications, chemical engineers, that sort of thing, because they bring a diversity of thought and perspective to the equation to mix in with the more die-in-the-wool technologists and that, and really shake us out of our assumptions. So top misconception is IT is not just technologists. A successful IT has people who can bridge well to the conversations across the business and do the translation necessary to make sure we're delivering the solutions that are needed, not just the ones that attracted our attention.
Great, thank you. Griselda?
So the question is?
What do you think are some common misconceptions people have about your profession?
Right. So for most of my time spent at PayPal, I worked in corporate communications, and I feel like to an audience that specializes in computer science, that could be the opposite of what you do, right? Communications may not be your strong suit, but that's something, I think is critical for this group, as I mentioned earlier in the previous question. And the common misconception when engineers or developers work with communications professionals is, do you just do press releases all day? Do you just issue press releases? Do you just write all day or talk to media? No, the short answer is no. We do more than that. We, in communications, we partner with, across the business actually, with many folks to deliver the message, however that may be. It could be press release, it could be through plans, PowerPoints, campaigns, different activations. So that is the misconception, and I encourage you folks, as you enter the workforce, to learn about the different functions in an organization that can really give you a leg up if you're proactive to reach out to different folks and try to understand what it is that they do.
Great. Thank you both. That was great insight. So I'm going to go to Fred and say, what are the challenges and opportunities within your sector and organization right now?
Yeah, for sure. So just a bit of background, finance is often seen as a kind of a high pressure environment. The hours are long, the work can be quite technical and quite difficult. You have very strict deadlines that you must manage and that you must hit because you are a public company and you're required to send out a month-end report without fail. In this kind of current COVID environment, Ian and Griselda already kind of touched on it. Mental health has been kind of like one of the big highlights as to how do we handle kind of ourselves and how do we manage our own mental health and how do we take care of ourselves in order to give us the space to be able to be thoughtful in our workday and not burn out. So you'll see a lot of tech companies in the Bay give their employees a lot more opportunities to disconnect, either through like an entire wellness day off, to give them more flexible hours, to give them additional opportunities to connect with their coworkers virtually in just a more casual setting. These types of things and these types of initiatives allow people to stay connected, to stay charged, to stay engaged with the company. Otherwise, you'll find that as employees that are continuing under pressure, that continually feel that they're disconnected, their work quality suffers, their mental health suffers, then their physical kind of health also suffers. And that's not something that is sustainable for very long. So the companies are very aware that these types of challenges are very unique. They are not going away anytime soon. So in order to be able to take care of ourselves, take care of our colleagues, and take care of the business, the company needs to be able to give those different types of flexibilities and benefits so all of us can stay charged up.
Thanks so much, Fred. Ian, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'm going to comment at it from a couple different angles. One was sector. So just want to remind everybody I'm speaking on behalf of my own experience, not on behalf of PayPal, and I'm certainly not necessarily a financial services expert in all senses of the word. But challenges in the sector, regulation and compliance, audits, that sort of stuff. That's a large part of what a financial company is about, right? And of course, in changing political climates and other uncertainty around the disruption of traditional means of moving money and that sort of stuff, PayPal's opportunity is to be really, really good at that, to be the most trusted, most secure company, financial services company on the planet. And so you can understand that in our organization, inside the company, in all organizations, that translates into challenges around making sure that we have the best information security, right? And if we do that really well, that solving that is also our opportunity. It's one of those beautiful things, right, in industry where solving a challenge actually is your opportunity. Comment a little bit about, to carry on a bit on what Fred was saying about the workforce as well within the IT organization. Again, we've focused a lot on trying to make sure all the collaboration technology like what we're using today works well. We use Microsoft Teams extensively at the company and the Microsoft 365 suite, that sort of stuff. We were fortunate we got that rolled out. What we're looking at now, though, is people came on site. What we're realizing is we can still collaborate. We can still meet and we can still reasonably collaborate, but people came on site into the office largely to connect, and how to recreate that ability to connect with people in that delightful ad hoc random way, right? And what we call the water cooler conversations turn out to be incredibly important. So that's a challenge right now, and that's something I'm deeply focused on and involved in some deep dialogues and work streams around how to recreate the ability to connect and create fresh ideas and new connections for people.
Thank you, Ian. For this next one, we're going to be going to you, Griselda. What do hiring trends look like in your industry right now, and what are your expectations for 2021?
That's a great question. And I see also someone asked a question about interview tips, so I probably can tie in a response that could potentially answer both. I think more and more employers are realizing the power of having a diverse workforce. Companies like Google, they look for quirkiness, things about you, things that make you stand out. So in the past, 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't good to stand out too much or have certain hobbies or some different type of trait about you. But I think now more than ever, it's important to be able to stand out in that way, and whether it's PayPal or Google or other tech companies, they like having employees with a life outside of just work too, right? So my advice, it's good that you have strong grades, but also bring to the table some special skill or hobby or interest, because employers know the power of having diverse employees because it represents your customers, right? You have diverse customers. You want employees who represent and look like and sound like your customers to have better products. So when it comes to interviewing, feel comfortable being your authentic self. We don't want to hear someone that's a robot or rehearsed or scripted. Be your authentic self. Do the research in the company. Again, companies can tell and interviewers can tell if you are just trying to play a numbers game and get as many interviews as you can, which potentially may work in your favor, but you really do stand out if you know the recent company news, for example. So before your interviews, look them up, see what the latest announcements are. Did they acquire a company? Are they partnering with another organization? Who is their CEO? What does the CEO believe in? Because now it's, work and personal life is blending a little bit more than ever before. So be cognizant of that blend and be genuinely interested in the company you apply for.
Well, thank you, Griselda, for confirming everything we say in co-op. And yes, that was a plug, and I'll move on. Sorry, had to do it. Okay, so I'm going to ask Ian, how can job seekers connect with employers now? Like there's LinkedIn, there's virtual job fairs. What else? Or could you comment on those or any other tips you might have?
Yeah, it's still the case, and it has been for a long, long time. And I don't see it changing that, 75% of people find jobs through somebody they know. So it is, things like LinkedIn are incredibly useful. They'll tell you, kind of the makeup about a company in ways that we haven't been able to before. By the way, just know that hiring managers, they will Google you. They will look in LinkedIn. They will Google your name. They will look for stuff. So be very careful around the type of connections you're making in online media. Make sure that you are presenting the at least the great word is Griselda, the authentic you, right? But please make sure it's one that you want to scale over the years and the ages. But the truth is, looking just at LinkedIn, looking just at job sites and that is not enough. Everybody right, is the connection to something. And what you share with them, the words you say, that 30-second or one phrase snapshot of what inspires you or what you want to do is something shared with somebody, potentially will be shared with somebody else, for better or for worse. So really my advice is, do the LinkedIn, do the job fairs, do the job boards, but that's what everyone's doing. You've got to be honest, talk to friends, relatives, have a sound bite, something meaningful, something that's distinguishable from the vast majority of what comes across like, I just want a job, right? It's like, I want to make a difference in the charitable sector with helping the hungry and people who are hungry in our communities, that sort of stuff. Okay, right? So people hear community, they hear charity, they don't worry about the hunger, right? Worry about the message you're saying about here's somebody who wants to make a difference in the community, right? So Don't shy away from that. And by the way, when you do make that connection, you do get in the door, because the question really focuses on getting in the door to actually have an interview. When you're in the interview, yeah, do the research in advance, right? And try to make a connection with the person, right? And if you don't know an answer, don't fake it. Say, be honest about it. That's also the authentic you, right? And it's hard, but at the end of it, if you have an interview, at the end of the interview, ask, how did I do? That might surprise them, but also delight them that here's somebody who's willing to be open to feedback. We want people in our workforce who are open to feedback, right? And that might make the biggest difference than what happened for the 30 minutes or the hour and a half preceding that.
Thank you, Ian. We've talked about a lot of specific little tips and on how to succeed at interviews, but what skill sets in general would you recommend the job seekers to develop to actually just succeed in the industry? And I'll take it to you, Fred, and then we'll go to you, Ian.
Yeah, so let me bridge kind of like the last question and this question together a little bit. When you're interviewing, especially in a finance or business role, you were always given a case. And that case is could be for a real company, could be for a hypothetical company, but it'll tell you a story and tell you a problem, and then it'll ask a question for you to solve. That, in order to be able to be successful for this kind of case interview style, you need to be able to work with the data that you're given, be able to interpret it in such a way that you can create that story that Griselda mentioned, and then also present that idea. So there's an element of having some technical capability. That is your profession. So in finance, it's probably building a financial model and then presenting it either in a PowerPoint deck or over the phone, or maybe even both, like in a Zoom meeting. And you will find this even in a lot of the engineering and computer science. You will be given a technical test, whether it's, do you understand SQL? Do you understand Python? Are you able to take a problem that the business gives you and then create a solution that uses your technical ability? But the most important thing is, can you present it? Can you tell the story of what did you think the problem was based on what you read from the case? What was the solution you thought of, like in a technical manner? And can you explain that solution to perhaps a non-technical person? And you get a lot of this experience, again, through the extracurricular courses or the extracurricular work that you do while you're in school. But even if you didn't do that in school, and I saw a question on this, like, how do you get that experience outside of it? For me personally, I got a lot of, postgraduate experience through being involved through like the community, particularly with the Vancouver Startup Week, doing hackathons. So being the business representative for a team that would just get stitched together. And then we would create something in 48 hours, and they needed someone to go sell the idea. So I put my hand up and I said, okay, I can go sell it. Just tell me what it is that we're selling and who we're selling it to. And then you understand, it's like, okay, this is what's required for trying to be successful in the real world. This is a real business problem, and we got to go find a solution in 48 hours. I'm not an engineer, but I can take your idea, I can explain it to lay people. And you do many of these types of exercises, and then you build that a critical thinking muscle, but then you also understand what are other, what are your team's technical capacities, and how do you translate across the entire team so that everyone understands what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day.
Thank you for that, Fred, especially discussing community. Now, Ian, over to you.
Yeah, so I look at it as there's three groups of skills. A third of them is soft skills. And those are universal. They're pretty well needed to succeed in just about any job in any industry, at least in the Western business world, right? It's like there's and soft skills, are not touchy-feely things. They're soft skills are things like the ability to influence, negotiate, communicate. You hear them expressed in the forms of teamwork, collaboration, really it's most of them add up as they develop in an individual. They get expressed in the form of leadership, right? But those are pretty well universal, and they're being looked for in interviews, even in resumes, even in the written word, and that not just how it's written and how it's communicated, but what are the things that the a person do? What did that require or implies that was required in the way of those soft skills? And the second group is, I would call, more contextual. That's the business function within the business that you're talking to. Those contextual skills in IT start to differentiate from the contextual skills in communications or finance or product development and that. Some of them are not unique to a business function, but now we're starting to zero more in on the context of where this individual role may be. The final third is hard skills. And this is where often people can zero in and focus, I would say, almost to making a mistake. Being overly concerned about whether, they want me to know that they're listing Ruby and I know Python or something like that, right? Is probably, those are more important point in time. Those will change. They will change for the organization. They'll change for the company. They'll change for the industry over time, right? So again, kind of a framework. The soft skills are universal. They'll last you throughout your career. You need to develop those early, and you need to continually develop them, right? And apply them through practice and results, right? Contextual ones, what you're hearing is you can take tech skills and actually work in different functions, right? So don't discount yourself because of the context is a new one when some of these are portable. And finally, the hard skills, don't get wrapped up in them. Oh, by the way, I'll just say, I've been on campus relationship teams where I've been gearing up for to recruit interns for the summer, say, or maybe new grad hires, and bang, a stack of 300 resumes. I'm not kidding. Will land on my desk, right, so to speak. And when I'm flipping through them, I'm not looking at the specifics of languages and that, because everybody's got those same things. I'm looking at what jumps out as being different, right? So somebody asked the question, what if new grads didn't take advantage of internships or extracurriculars, right? Hopefully you've done something, or you still have the opportunity to do something. And even if you're still looking for a job, do something that differentiates you from all the people who took computing 101, 110, all that standard stuff. Do something that's going to jump out and differentiate you from everyone else, right? And that will help make you jump out of that, out of the common set of resumes.
Thank you so much for that, Ian. Now that's it for the questions that we had prepared for the panelists. But we've also been receiving some great questions from both the Q&A box and also from the Eventbrite registration for this event. So we're going to go to some of those questions now. The first one that we have here, I'll put to you, Fred. For students early in their college career, so first and second year students, what do you recommend they do now to prepare for a career in tech?
Sure. So there's two things. One is take a good chunk of breadth courses. It's really important to understand someone else's world while developing your own kind of specialty. In a lot of times when I was working with co-op as well as the student affairs office, we always talked about SFU undergrads being very T-shaped. You have a very broad set of kind of knowledge and very deep specialty in one or two areas. That kind of mindset is very critical in anything that you do in tech, because again, everything is changing so fast. The data is very nuanced. The complete picture isn't always available. So you have to be able to research and find information about someone else's world and find out what you need to do in your specialty and in your kind of professional context in order to solve that problem. And kind of like the next thing to look at is that continual practice piece. It's like, how do I practice being a T-shaped person, and how do I continue that development over time? And when you look at opportunities post-graduation or after your time at SFU, the community is a great way to look at finding those opportunities. Volunteering for a local food bank, volunteering for a local business association, finding different types of hackathons is something that I continue to look for opportunities to, because everyone has an idea. Not everyone has the ability or resources to be able to go implement it. Sometimes they do need that person that knows finance to put together a financial model and to see if this thing can actually work as a business. Or there may be someone who needs and sees a problem with a particular piece of technology, or sees an application but doesn't have the engineering background in order to make it mechanically work. So as you have those conversations in the community, you find those opportunities kind of going across your desk. And at the same time, as Ian mentioned, you build out your network. You build out the list of names in your address book that will end up in somewhere. And a lot of times you will get your first job through referral, as I did mine. My first job was for a fintech company in Vancouver, and I was referred into by someone who I helped put on a Frosh event back in 2009. And I started working right away in 2011, right out of university.
Great answer. Thank you so much. So Ian, I'm going to pose this one to you. It's from the questions, and it says, how can I champion the importance of the design process in a company without a strong design culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been through a similar experience in my own career when I made my first job change. So a couple things to think about. One is your ability, unless you're the CEO, you want to think about, how big is this windmill that you're going to tilt against, so to speak. My first thought is, think about if they don't have a design culture, what is their culture? What is the methodology by which they're delivering results and getting stuff done? Is that equally viable, right? Is it working? And this is where I would start leveraging that soft skill of influence, right? If I do some assessment and I design well, introducing some design into their existing culture is useful. How do I create an affinity between the design process and the culture they do have to try and bring the two together? Because humbling experience early in my career, I just assumed I was hired because of everything I'd done. Now, and it was kind of a short, sharp shock when I realized after a couple months, I was hired for what I could bring to the existing equation, not to come in and change it all, right? So I guess my advice would be, think carefully around what does exist and how you can explain the value proposition of introducing the design process as an addition to, or as an adjustment to, what's already being done, not to replace it. Replacing it, at best you'll get a revolt. So, okay.
Thank you for that, Ian. Now, we've had a lot of answers talking about the importance of communication skills, and someone asked on our Eventbrite specifically, how do you improve your communication skills? And for that, I'm going to turn it to you, Griselda.
Right. Excellent question. So there are many ways you could do this. There's different aspects of communications. There is the written communications, and with that, practice writing as much as you can, and that could just be blogging, right? Like journaling. That's how I practice my writing, and I don't always just write press releases, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of times I spend time, and I'm an introvert, and I like to just blog and journal, and just practicing writing, getting to rhythm, that helps with your written communications. With speaking, role playing is very helpful. If you have a trusted colleague or a mentor, or even a sibling who's willing to practice with you, it's a great way to practice your presentations, practice a pitch that you want to say, practice your interviewing, right? The more you practice, the better you get. That's as simple as that. With that. And then there's other forms of communications with the graphic communications, if that's something you're interested in, doing design work, reach out to people in the field and ask for help or tips. That's the best way. So that would be my advice. Practice, practice, practice.
Thank you. And Ian, I'm also going to go to you for your advice on this as well.
I'm going to speak a little bit anecdotally from how I did improve my communication skills. I would say earlier in my career, I kind of fooled myself into a view that that my results spoke for themselves, and that I worked on systems and architecture and some pretty cool stuff. But the truth is, the technology didn't speak for itself, right? I mean, people enjoyed its benefits, but to be honest, if I didn't speak up, sometimes nobody was going to speak up for me, right? If I didn't share how it was done, nobody else would benefit from that result. So I was fortunate at Cisco that I was, of course, in IT, and Cisco's in the business of selling technology, IT technology, largely to IT. And they had an executive briefing center. And I was asked one day to go and do an executive briefing to a customer. And I was nervous as heck and just kept stressing out and fretting about PowerPoint slides and that sort of stuff. And it went okay, but I knew in my heart that it could have gone a lot better. So I got a couple of colleagues to say, next time I do this, could you sit in and give me feedback, right? That's the courageous step, to ask others to give you feedback. And by the way, that's become a fairly common thing for me, and something I coach my teams to do is when you do a presentation, pull somebody aside, and not necessarily a person who's going to tell you what you want to hear, somebody who will tell you what you need to hear, right? How did you do? How could it be different? How could it be better? How well did it work? Anyways, long story short, I had the good fortune that I got to do 6, and then I got to do 12, and then I got the biggest tip of my career, which is don't stand behind the PowerPoint slides. Stand in front of them. You know your topic. They're there to hear you. They're not there to see the slides, right? And eventually, I did literally several hundred executive briefings at Cisco Systems, and I've learned that if it's a topic I know, to speak from the heart, speak from the experience, stand in front of the slides. So I think out of that comes practice and build an ecosystem of feedback. Some people you trust and people who will tell you the things you need to know about how you're doing with your communication skills.
Thank you for that, Ian. I'm now going to shift over to Griselda. How has technology shifted business operations for you?
How has technology shifted? Well, I feel like it's actually, I was going to say, I'm going to talk about Ian's job, his functionality. He just talked a lot about the importance of collaboration tools, right? I'm sure everyone here uses Slack. And at PayPal we use actually many options. We have Slack, we use Teams, different tools. So I think with business operations, the goal is to help the team that you support become more effective and more efficient. And so we definitely lean into technology a lot. We are open to exploring to technology because at the end of the day, we don't want to waste productivity. We all move very fast, we work fast, and having something crash, your Teams freeze or your Zoom fail could really affect productivity. And so within PayPal, the nice thing, and Ian can vouch for this, is we have the options. The company, what I like about it is that they allow us to explore different tools. So for example, like Slido, I don't know if anybody on this call has used Slido, but it's a polling tool and it allows you to interact with the audience in real time. And so I feel like we're in, the more we move into the future, the more these type of collaboration tools are becoming available everywhere. And even companies like Facebook are developing internal intranets. I think it's called Workplace, to look at how do we help the employee become more productive, so they have more time. Of course, the vision is to help you have more time to yourself and personal time, and also just reduce the amount of the hours needed to accomplish something or be able to have a bigger impact. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. And Fred, I'm actually going to take it to you to answer that same question as well.
Yeah, so Griselda talked a lot about, collaboration tools, and that's important for kind of employee culture, but I probably wanted to circle back to kind of an earlier point about kind of creating the opportunities in the space to be mentally well, and to take the time and then build in the culture to respect that people have boundaries and people have other kind of obligations that are now being kind of demanded of them in this type of work from home environment. So the business is definitely changing in order to be able to help people accommodate that and keep a balanced life. As you see with everyone's type of engagement and their kind of engagement level, those that are given those opportunities to take time off, to disconnect, to be able to take up a passion project maybe once every couple of weeks, we find them to be much more engaged, to be much more refreshed when they're challenged to come up with solutions to kind of what's happening in that day. And for our colleagues that are feeling burnt out, there's now a culture to be able to talk to them and reach out and to check in with each other to make sure we're all okay. Because this type of environment that we're in right now has its own kind of unique stressors. And a lot of the different outlets that we use to take care of that stress aren't available today. So the business is continually evolving and allowing people to have additional outlets to relieve that stress, to take care of themselves mentally, and then, as Ian and Griselda mentioned, to collaborate together when we are refreshed and when we are engaged.
Okay.
Great, thanks so much. We're just about at the 5:25 area, and we have time for a closing question. But before we ask this question, if anyone is able to stay on after, Ian, Griselda, and Fred have agreed that they can stay longer and answer some more questions. So please feel free to stay with us if your time allows. And so here is our closing question. We'll start with Ian and then we'll go to Griselda. What advice could you give new graduates and recent alumni to succeed?
Create a career plan. And the key first step to a career plan is knowing your motivations. The motivations are different for every individual, and for each individual, your motivations are different in time. The motivations could be things like a desire to learn more. It could be the desire for a title. It could be a desire for a promotion or a grade level or something like that. It could be a desire to achieve results, for yourself, for others, for the community, right? It could be income. And those motivations, none of them are good or bad. They're all different for people, and they're all different for people over time, right? So make sure you understand your motivations and make sure you build a career plan. Set a direction. I like to say that a career plan is putting a stake in the ground somewhere, distant from where you are, to set a direction. As you take that journey, you're going to start learning things. You're going to learn things about yourself. And it's okay to pick up that stake and move it to another place. It's not okay to not have that stake in the ground in the first place, because then you're just subject to whatever influence comes to you, right? So ironically, create a career plan, but also stay flexible and be realistic, right? And learn from the journey that you take.
Thanks, Fred. Over to you, Griselda.
Thanks. So thinking back, for me, I actually did not have a career plan. I wish maybe that would have been good advice, but also I was very open to opportunities. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. I had an idea of what I wanted to accomplish outside of school. I wanted to travel. I wanted to have an international exposure with different companies. And that was my career plan straight out of school. I didn't know what I would wanted to do 10, 20 years down the road, but I knew if I were able to accomplish those items, I would be on the right path. And then one thing leads to the next. So in absence of a career plan, have a mission statement, right? I would say take time before you graduate, think about what matters to you. Do you want flexibility in your life? Do you want to travel? Do you want to learn specific skills? Know what your mission statement is, and then be open to opportunities to pursue and realize that mission statement. And once you join a company, I always tell recent college graduates to use that newbie card as much as you can. Ask a million questions. Managers and senior leaders find it refreshing. They like having young people come in and challenge with good questions. Don't just be a yes person. So ask good questions. Be proactive. Don't wait till your manager tells you have to do something, then you do it. It's always refreshing when recent college grads come in and they have ability to contribute and think proactively. And again, someone asked a question about how do I stand out? That is one way to stand out, is being able to learn to anticipate the needs of your colleagues, your manager, and your customers. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much, Fred, Griselda, and Ian. You've really provided some valuable information to our alumni and friends. So now we're going to continue with some more of the questions that we've received through the Q&A box. And I'm going to start with the first question. And anybody who wants to jump in, go for it. Are there any policies in PayPal for employees doing side business, side hustles? Do employees have even the time for that? You think in addition to work-life balance?
So the policies exist. There can be a fair bit of detail in that, but I would say the basics of it are, as long as you're not competing against PayPal, as long as you're not creating a conflict of interest, as long as you're not creating some kind of insider problem, basically it's about risk to the company, risk and the company's reputation, and risk to you and your ability to fulfill your obligations, your employment obligations to PayPal, right? So there's definitely a policy in place, and it is possible to have a side business, and it does basically come down to how distant is it from PayPal, and are you generating any perceived or real risk?
Yeah, I think to add to that too, it's actually a good question because it shows that you are interested, whoever asked this question, that interested in making sure you continue to invest in your own self. And that is something that when you're young and you're new to the workforce, you just think you have to work like a workhorse 24/7. But it's also important to think about investing in yourself. So whether that's doing a side hustle that relates to a hobby you like to do, or drawing anime, or learning how to make boba, whatever it is, definitely invest in yourself in that way, because your well-being will rely on it. So definitely.
Great. I'll move on to the next question. So how do you communicate to employers via cover letters and interviews? As in, how do you get it through that you stand out, or get it through that you're critical thinking or you're coachable?
Yeah, so I can take a stab at that one. I think for me, when I'm looking at cover letters and interviews, I'm looking to see kind of what's their background from a technical education standpoint, like what faculty are they from, what kind of coursework did they do. But I'm really looking to see what they did outside of their regular coursework. Are they engaged? Are doing extracurricular activities? Are they joining associations where they're helping the community? Because that gives me some context as to what they're doing and how they're applying what they learned in the classroom to the real world, and allows me to kind of read into their cover letter a little bit more to see if they're if they're actually really passionate about, being involved and applying those skills. So it's a bit of a combination on, can I take what they've written at face value, but then also try to triangulate what do I see on LinkedIn? What do I see on Facebook or Twitter? Are they actually involved? Are there blog posts? Are there interviews? What have their peers said about them? So they really stand out when I'm finding from all different areas that someone's really talking about this person and they're recognized by the community as being that person who's very engaged, the one that's taken their major or what they've studied and applying it to the real world. Even though they might be just very junior, they're actively engaged in trying to do some good.
That's great. Thanks. Now, here's a good question. I actually love this question, so I'm going to ask it. It is, and whoever would like to jump in, please do. It might probably be good to hear from all three of you. What are your favorite failures?
So it is a great question. And there was an Eventbrite question as well that was very similar. What's the biggest mistake you've made? I gave a lot of thought about that last night and realized the biggest mistake I've made and has been what I didn't do or what I didn't do earlier, right? Taking too long to seize an opportunity or to make an obvious change for myself. So by the way, I don't like to, I look at failures and mistakes as if it was a genuine attempt at doing something, and I coach my own teams on this as well. If you were genuinely trying to do something new and different, that's what the company needs, right? We need to stay competitive and evolve. And if you haven't done it before, the mistakes are a reality, errors are a reality, and that's what you do about it that makes the difference. But back to my point, mine is, wow, when I finally did do something, I'm like, why didn't I do that a year ago or 2 years ago? Or seeing an opportunity and just waiting a little too long and somebody else sees the opportunity and really took the risk and did something that really was what I was enthralled with and I wish I'd been the one to speak up first. So biggest mistake is waiting too long, just to lean in and take a risk and accept a challenge.
Right. Griselda, you want to go next?
I think Ian took the words out of my mouth. So I echo what Ian has said, but I think, I don't know about specific examples, but I know earlier in my career, I was really scared to make mistakes. I was more of a perfectionist and wanting to make sure I look composed and say the right thing and do the right thing and blend in. But I very quickly realized after working in tech, specifically, there's the whole mentality of fail fast, fail forward, make mistakes, because Ian pointed out, making mistakes means you're trying. And a lot of leadership principles in tech coaches and encourages people to make the mistake. So I think being yourself, being more comfortable being yourself and your authentic self at work is one of the biggest lessons, I think, I would say. But don't be scared to make mistakes.
Thanks, Griselda. How about you, Fred?
Yeah, I think like my biggest shortcoming in my career is never asking for help fast enough. I always kind of wanted to try to figure out something, like focus down, see if I could do it myself. But a lot of times I would be waiting too long or take too much time, and then an issue becomes a much bigger issue. And it could have been solved if I just asked for help soon enough. So it kind of goes back to learn to make decisions quickly. Don't be afraid to make a mistake yourself, but know that there's a lot of support around you when you start working for working for a company. Your manager is there to help you. Your colleagues are there to help you, even if it just means tapping someone on the shoulder to say, hey, I need to bounce an idea off of you. That changes your entire perspective on how you approach a problem. And a lot of times those kind of one-off conversations, just to say, hey, what do you think, saves you a lot of headache down the line.
I almost think like the question too should be, it's not about what is your biggest failure, but it's how to fail well. I think I should encourage everyone on this call to think about that. You have to almost plan for that. You are going to make mistakes. So have a plan for, like, if I do have if I do fail or make a mistake, how do I come out of that? Because if you can learn how to come out of that and turn your mistakes into successes, that can turn your whole situation out. So
Yeah.
think about that question.
Yeah, there's that term at work, fail forward, right? Can you take away from that stuff that improves the next iteration and accelerates you towards success? Yeah.
Yeah, don't freeze and hope that nobody notices that you made a mistake. Like get in front of it. Talk to people. Have a plan in place for how you turn that mistake into a win.
Great. Thank you all for your questions. There's a question here that I found really interesting because I find most of our topics here are how to get into the workplace. And this one person asked, how does one handle a situation where they feel the work they are doing feels repetitive or redundant? And how do you move on from there? And I was wondering if you had any answers to that. Maybe I can start with you, Ian.
So first of all, every role has a certain amount of repetitive or work. My approach is, so I'm fascinated with systems and processes and procedures and that. So my way of usually making that work more interesting is either to, if it's something, an area that I have some control over, finding some way to optimize it. That at least makes that more interesting while I'm doing it, to see if there's a way to optimize it. If it's owned by another group or another business function than that, I will respectfully give them feedback on on how I think it could be improved and changed. There's always a certain amount of this in everyone's job, right? The key would be to speak up if you see opportunities to have it improve.
Yeah, and in finance, a lot of that is kind of the same. Month end happens every single month, so you're doing the same thing over and over again without fail every single month. You make that kind of work interesting by improving on the process or asking yourself why are the results showing why they are. And when you're trying to help your colleagues also understand what your world looks like, it also kind of adds that element of additional engagement, because you're taking a very repetitive process, but you're now drawing some meaning from and benefit from it, not just for yourself, but for someone else on your team or someone else in the business. So that's the way you get around some of that monotony and that repetition. You give it a purpose and give it some life after you've done that process, so it benefits someone else, whether it's directly on your team or somewhere else in the company.
Thanks so much. There's so many great questions in here, but I really think this is a really important one that someone has posed. What meaningful steps has PayPal made in light of Black Lives Matter movement, which brought forward systematic racism that exists in so many workplaces? And the person also said, which I'm sure PayPal is not immune to. Who would like to go first on that one?
The events earlier this year that led to the protests and the waves of reaction and engagement around the world were felt very strongly at PayPal. PayPal, various companies responded in various ways. PayPal actually responded with a $550 million commitment to enable Black and disadvantaged communities and businesses and that to hopefully change their situation, if not thrive, right? A substantial program. A chunk of that was internally, maybe 30, 40 million was internally to the company. But the vast majority of it is finding its way out into communities around the U.S. and around the world, right? We have a new VP with a priority charter and focus on these issues, not just diversity and inclusion, but our response and our engagement with the world and the communities we serve, as well as the communities inside our company.
Yeah. I'm super proud of how our company has responded. And in fact, our CEO has shared that the bold statement we made with contributing $500 and I think it was actually $30 million to the community received accolades. He had people, government calling him and other company CEOs calling him just to applaud our CEO on making such a bold statement and supporting the community in that way. And what I admired about our CEO and how he handled it is he started with internally first and talking to our Black colleagues. Right? He had a couple of Q&As with them and trying to understand what is it that I could do? What can I do that is meaningful? Right? There are companies out there that were quick to put out blogs to say, oh, we stand with Black Lives Matter, but nothing really came out of it. Whereas our CEO really took the first few weeks after it happened and the protest broke out and the movement started moving to talk to individuals, grasp the problem. And you can apply that type of way of addressing issues with any situation, right? First, understand your stakeholders. It's not about just going out there and bragging about what you can do and showcasing what it is, because that comes and goes. You don't want to virtue signal, right? And so I'm extremely proud of how our company's handled, and we still continue to just doing stuff, initiatives to support the Black community. But thank you for the question. You can Google it and find articles about it.
Thank you for your answers on such an important question. Our next question also kind of ties into one of our Eventbrite questions. What are your motivations? And Ian, I believe you're quite excited to take this one up, so why don't you go first?
Well, I'd also noticed in the Eventbrite questions as well, a similar question around what's your inspiration in the work that you do, right? And motivations and inspiration are very tightly coupled together in that. So it's different for each one of us. So I have my motivation in terms of what interests me and what I love to do. I mentioned it earlier. I love systems. It shows up everywhere. I love motorcycles because I get to work on them and I get to I can kind of get literally my arms around them and see how they work. I love I got into computers because it's a system that I can mold. They're malleable. You can make them do stuff in that, right? Originally in physics, because I wanted to understand how the world worked and how the system of the universe, so to speak, right? So that's one motivation. Anything that gives me a chance to put a system together, right? And that includes people, process, and technology, and that's what's led to where I am today. So I've always stayed true to my personal motivations around a high level of engagement and interest in something. How can I make a business system of people and technology and process work better, right? But the other motivation is seeing results, and results are incredibly important, by the way. I think there was another question around, and I'm going to tie it to another question around, how do I make my CV, my resume, and stand out in that? Talk about the results. Don't talk about the effort, right? We all have effort in everything we do, right? The results will make the difference in business, right? So make sure you call that out. So for me, the motivation and results, for the latter half of my career, I've been in management, is helping people develop, right? Help people learn new skills, turn that skills into experience, turn experience into wisdom, right? Wisdom is the ability to share your mistakes with others so that they can benefit and not repeat those sort of things, right? And encouraging people to take those risks and move forward. So I love seeing people deliver the best results. And frankly, I love even when the best people in my team go on to a new role or a new job within the company, right? To me, that's success.
Great, thank you. Fred, do you want to take a shot at that question as well?
Yeah. For me, it's kind of going towards that career path kind of goal. So I personally want to be a CFO by the time I turn 40, and in order to be able to achieve that level of my career path, I need a certain set of skills that I need to pick up along the way. So it goes back to kind of Ian's advice about having a plan, putting a stake in the road. CFO at 40 is kind of where I set that stake. And a lot of the motivator for that is part of me just wants to take my profession to the furthest level it can go. And that kind of end game or that kind of state is what I use as inspiration, because a lot of my mentors were also CFOs of their companies, and I've seen what they're able to do in that capacity, and the good that they're also able to drive into the community. In terms of kind of like professional context or like technical context, I could spend 10 hours a day in Excel building financial models. I love that kind of element of finding out, how does the company actually work? How do you actually make money? Who are you selling to? And can I translate that into a financial model and explain it to somebody else? It's kind of like one of those kind of weird quirks that you kind of highlight in your CV, is that I build financial models for fun, and I like analyzing financial models for fun. And then someone will look at that, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I want to talk to this person. But that also opened up a lot of opportunities for me, because that's how I started getting into case competitions. Even though I was concentrating in marketing on the business side, like, you don't ask a marketer to build financial models, at least not when I was in university. But that gave me kind of an edge when it came to interviews and even like the competitions themselves, that says, hey, here's your financial forecast after we launch this campaign or after we do this activation. And it definitely helped with in hackathons, when you had to have some sort of a business plan and had to quickly put together a financial model to explain the program that you built or the website that you coded.
Thank you very much. And Griselda, I'll take it to you to answer the motivations question as well.
So what motivates me? I like problem solving, and I like to problem solve creatively. So I like puzzles, solving how to make things more efficient and processes and things like that. So I enjoy that, but with the creative angle, and I love a good challenge. So I continue to do that day to day. Less that at my work, every day is a new challenge. Yes, we do have to do those redundant, repetitive admin work, regardless of whatever level you are in, whether you're CFO or CTO, you still have to do repetitive, redundant work. But it's nice to be in a workplace where you can continuously challenge yourself and continue to invest in yourself. So that is what motivates me.
Great. Thank you very much. We now have 5 more minutes, and so we can only take one more question. So the question that we have here is, being a CS student, do you think it's worthwhile to spend more time doing well in your classes or pursuing personal projects? How do you essentially balance between trying to get as high of a grade as possible and also doing some extracurriculars and personal projects to be able to put on your resume? For that, I'll start with you, Fred.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a good kind of segment to go into, like, about focus time. Make time for both. While you're doing classes, having a semester, having a full course load, do take the time and focus on getting good grades and getting a good GPA. But because SFU is so broad and it has so many opportunities available to it, you get some of that applicable experience in co-op. So sign up for co-op, sign up for business clubs, sign up for extracurricular activities, because it allows you to have that focus time and do very well in whatever you decide to kind of do at that moment. And when you have that kind of separation, okay, I'm going to take 2 semesters of a full course load, or over maybe even an extra course here and there, but I'm going to have 2 extra courses, whether I'm going to study abroad or whether I'm going to do co-op. And during that time, that's going to be my thing. I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to do great at it. I'm going to finish it properly.
Thank you very much. And Ian, I'll take it to you.
I'm going to talk about the GPA thing for a sec, because I think it came up in a couple of Eventbrite questions as well. There is, so definitely you want to do well in your classes, okay? Not only do you want to graduate, you want to know the material, you want to be able to speak to it, and you want to be able to pull upon it later. It's not about cramming for an exam. It's about several years later. That's right. I learned about some of that sort of stuff, and you'll be surprised what comes back to you later. There is also a very practical fact, and that is when companies are looking to hire new grads and stuff like that, they have to put some kind of cutoff, right? They already have hundreds of candidates, right? You know, there's that practical fact of a threshold, right? So as if your grade drops down, you're dropping down below the thresholds of that each company sets for themselves based upon how much time they have to go and look through candidates. So keep that in mind. However, as long as your GPA is above that threshold, my experience, again, I mentioned it earlier, I'm going to look about, okay, you made that cut. I'm looking through resumes. I'm going to look for what's different, right? I'm going to look for, my favorite example from the past was, again, I saw a resume from somebody who obviously was an international student, right? Because their early schooling was in India and they were at a UC school. And what popped out was the fact the person was an RA, right? A residential assistant, right? So we were, sort of, and I went, I've got to talk to this person. That's got to be like a whole cultural and that. And sure enough, the person did it to challenge themselves to learn how to deal with situations that were unanticipated, to force the ability to communicate clearly in English and that sort of stuff. Did it for a year. What was the worst experience? Somebody lit a fire in the dorm, right? And to call emergency services and deal with it and that sort of stuff. You still doing it now? No. I went on to become, to lead one of the campus clubs. I felt as a club president would probably be a little more planful and that sort of stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is, how do you work that in? Do something. Is there something you're already doing as part of campus life that you can take a leadership role and make and distinguish yourself in? Okay, find some way to work that into the curriculum as well, your personal curriculum.
Thank you so much for that question. And if you're part of campus life and part of the society, you can always get involved with the Computing Science Society. So a little plug for us there. But to end off this question, I'm going to take it to you, Griselda.
So again, I would say think about what your mission statement is and what is it the next thing that you want to do. So if you want to go to grad school or become a doctor one day, I think it's very critical you maintain your high grades because they look at that and that is valuable. So if that's your mission to pursue more academics, definitely, have high grades, and high grades does reflect your ability to be committed, your ability to navigate the competitive environment that is the university brings, especially SFU. So that does reflect in it. But when I'm looking on the flip side, if I'm looking at resumes, I don't necessarily know what grade you have. It doesn't usually show up. Some people may post it. But then if I am comparing two developers or two people and one person it just shows that they have perfect grades, but there's nothing else interesting about them. And then there's someone else who also has perfect grades, but they're part of the Dragon Boat team, or a Christ has volunteered with charities. It's probably the person who has a little bit more is going to be more interesting to talk to. So it's not going to be bad that you have good grades. I think it's a good idea because that in itself tells you a lot about the person, but try to have something interesting as well that's on the side or a hobby. And hopefully you're able to fit that in. I know that it could be hard with all the schoolwork, but try to fit in at least one thing that you enjoy, whether that's photography, people at work, we have all kinds of people. We have people who are interested in knives and baking and martial arts. Our CEO, his favorite hobby is Krav Maga. And his motto is to never stand still because he applies the lessons from martial arts into his day job. So it's a very complementary. So that's my advice.
Well, thank you all. So Fred, Griselda, and Ian, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out to speak with us today. They were really great points and advice you shared with us tonight. Our panelists have graciously agreed to have their LinkedIn URLs, and these will be posted in the chat room in a moment. for you to connect with them.